She was born to abandon her daughter. She was originally kindLater. She discovered that in the deep palace kindness will only be swallowed up. Only by any means can we survive. What principles do we need? Without principles, we can live better. Chapter 1. Disease Body. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. In the 18th year of the reign of Emperor Zhou, the emperor passed away, causing great sorrow throughout the country. Prince Xiaoji of the kingdom of Zhou succeeded to the throne and appointed his second son Xiaohong as the crown prince, taking over the eastern palace. In the same year, women of appropriate age from all over the country were recruited to the palace for a talent show, and they spread their branches and leaves for the royal family. All officials and women in the entire Zhou kingdom were among the candidates. Up to the first-rank minister, down to the prefectural governor and county magistrate. In the quaint room, sunlight shines through the meticulously carved windows and shines on the ground, reflecting the brightness of the room. The wall is covered with calligraphy and paintings. The screen cleverly cuts the room apart, ensuring privacy and adding a sense of hierarchy. Behind the screen, on a large carved bed, there are brocade bedding. There was a sleeping woman lying on the bed, with a haggard face. A little maid pushed the door open with a squeak and quietly walked up to the woman. She called out softly, "Miss, Mississippi." The person on the bed opened their sleepy eyes and looked at the little maid in front of them, saying, "Ming'er, how long have I been sleeping?" Ming'er said, "Miss, it's almost noon. I'm taking a break today. The master and his wife have accompanied Miss Air out to burn incense, so we don't need to say hello at noon today." The person on the bed is named Yan Ruoxue, who was picked up and raised by the wife of the county magistrate outside. Later on, after having his own daughter, he became picky about this adopted daughter, often scolding and insulting her with various words, extremely harsh, and abandoned her like a lowly servant. Fortunately, she grew up with her sisters as servant girl. Ming'er protects her tightly. Yan Ruoxue was about to get up, and Ming'er quickly ran over to support her, saying, "Miss has been sick for several days now, and I haven't seen the old lady come to take a look. When I have time, I accompany Miss Air to the outside of the city to offer incense, but I don't want to take a look at Mississippi. She's so sick that she's completely unrecognizable." Yan Ruoxue sat by the bed, looking listless and said, "All right, Ming'er, stop talking." Ming'er helped Yan Ruoxue and walked towards the dowry, saying, "Ming'er just loves you, Mississippi. You're so sick, and you have to go to the ancestral hall to copy scriptures and pray for blessings. How can you handle this?" Yan Ruoxue said, "It's nothing, Ming'er, cough. It's just a little cold. The most important thing about praying for blessings and copying scriptures is sincerity. Father and mother raised Ruoxue only to do something within their power." Ming'er said, "Now your majesty has ordered all eligible women from official families and nobles to enter the palace for the selection, and Miss is also among them. Miss needs to get better soon." Yan Ruoxue sat in front of the mirror, looking at herself in the bronze mirror. Her face was pale and haggard, and her long illness had already dragged her into a sickly state. Yan Ruoxue said, "The road to the palace is long and obstructed, with many famous ladies and unparalleled beauties among them. The intrigues in the palace are even more powerful than the other palace ladies, and they are easy to get along with. Ming'er, this girl, thinks everything too simple. How could this road be so easy to follow?" Ming'er said, "Miss, Ming'er can help you dress up." Yan Ruoxue nodded, and Ming'er quickly combed her hair into a bun, applied some powder, and applied some mouth fat. Covering the sickly appearance made me look a bit energetic. Looking at Yan Ruoxue in the mirror, Ming'er placed her hands on her shoulders and said, "Miss, you are truly a national beauty. You will definitely be chosen this time." Yan Ruoxue said, "You're such a silly girl. How could you praise your young lady so much?" In the ancestral hall, there are plaques of all the deceased ancestors of the Yan family, lit with eternal lanterns. Yan Ruoxue was sitting upright on the side, copying Buddhist scriptures and praying for her father and mother. Walking into a man who was nearly 50 years old, the person who came was her adoptive father Yan Zhong. Yan Zhong knelt in front of the tablet and kowtowed 3 times. Standing up and walking towards Yan Ruoxue, who was copying scriptures, when she saw him approaching, Yan Ruoxue stood up and bent down to bow, saying, "Greet my father." The man glanced at her and then looked at the Buddhist scriptures on the desk. "If your body is not good, you don't need to do these things." Yan Ruoxue straightened her body and said, "Thank you for your father's concern. Ruoxue is not in any way. Copying scriptures and praying for blessings requires sincerity in order to protect the health of both parents." Yan Zhongdao said, "Good health is something that can be useful for both gods and Buddhas. What else should a doctor do?" Yan Ruoxue said, "What my father said is true, but Ruoxue believes in the matter of gods and Buddhas." Yan Zhong said, "All right, being a father is not here to blame you. It's time to enter the palace for the draft soon. It's better to take care of yourself as soon as possible. You don't need to do these things anymore." Yan Ruoxue said, "Ruoxue listens entirely to her father." Yan Zhong said, "Go ahead. I have invited a doctor for your father and mother to come back and take care of your sister's health. I will have him come to show you later." If it weren't for being in the draft, her father wouldn't even want to see her daughter. Yan Ruoxue furrowed her brows and said, "Is your sister feeling unwell?" Yan Zhong said, "Maybe I ate something bad." "All right, let's go back." Yan Ruoxue said, "Ruoxue, please leave." Yan Zhong suddenly said, "Oh, by the way." Yan Ruoxue quickly stopped her steps and looked at his adoptive father, saying, "What other orders does father have?" Yan Zhong said, "Ruoxue, I know you have been smart since childhood. In the future, your sisters will go to the palace together. You should take more care of your sister for the sake of your father and mother who have kept you for so many years. Although they haven't given you much love, they haven't let you lack food and clothing after all. Your mother and I can't rest assured that she is alone. We don't want her to shine, but we want her to be safe and smooth. Yes, having a blood relationship is different, and parents who love their daughter have a profound plan." Yan Ruoxue smiled lightly and said, "Father doesn't need to say, Ruoxue will also take good care of her younger sister." Yan Zhong turned around and left. Yan Ruoxue looked at the departing figure, feeling cold all over, just like her heart. Although she is raised in this home, she cannot feel any warmth of home. She really envied her younger sister Yan Ruoxuang. She was born with a father and mother who loved her so much. She held it in her hand for fear of falling, and held it in her mouth for fear of melting. And for herself, she was abandoned from birth and raised in this family without being treated well. No matter what she did, she couldn't move her parents. Chapter 2. Uninvited Guests. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Yan Ruoxue returned to the room, while Ming'er was tidying up the room. Seeing Yan Ruoxue's return, she put down the feather duster in her hand and stepped forward to support her, afraid that she might bump her. Usually, when it's time, Ming'er will go to the temple to pick her up and come back. Today, seeing her return by herself, Ming'er couldn't help but ask, "Miss, why did she come back by herself?" Yan Ruoxue patted and supported Ming'er, saying, "Today my father asked me to wait in my room. A doctor will come to diagnose my pulse later, so I came back early." Ming'er helped her pass by and sat down on the warm seat, pouring her a cup of hot tea and saying, "The master really thinks of Mississippi." Yan Ruoxue took the tea channel and said, "Ming'er, don't talk nonsense. Father is just too busy on weekdays." In fact, she knows better than anyone else in her heart that saying so is just self-deception. Ming'er said, "Then Ming'er go to the door and guard. When the doctor arrives later, bring him in." Without waiting for Yan Ruoxue to speak, the little girl bounced and ran to the door, staring and waiting. For a long time, without seeing the doctor's figure, Ming'er had to come back and stand aggrieved in front of Yan Ruoxue, saying, "Miss, it must be Miss Eyre who pretended to be sick again and didn't let the doctor come to see you. This has been so many times." Upon hearing Minger's words, Yen Ruoxue knew what was going on. Every time Minger invites a doctor back, she is kidnapped by Yen Ruoxue halfway and sent back to wait. Every time it's either dizziness, headache, or tinnitus, or simply losing appetite, it's just uncomfortable everywhere. After finishing reading, the doctor was sent away, so Yen Ruoxue's illness has been dragging on, causing her to look like this now. Even if her parents knew, they would turn a blind eye. Yen Ruoxue said, "Tomorrow, don't talk nonsense. People eat grains and miscellaneous grains, how can they not get sick? Perhaps Sister Ruoxue really has some health problems." Minger rolled her eyes and said, "Miss, that wasn't the case with Miss Eyre that time. You're still here to speak for her." Yen Ruoxue said, "All right, Minger, my cold is not that severe. Just cover it with a blanket when I sleep at night." Minger pursed her lips and said, "Miss, you always say that. It's been a long time and it hasn't been good. You have to go so early every day to greet the old lady." Yen Ruoxue glanced at her and saw that this girl was so bold that she dared to say anything and even choreographed the Lord and Mother behind her back. Yen Ruoxue said, "Minger, you must not be impolite. As a child, it is inevitable to meditate in the morning and evening. How can you arrange your father and mother in front of me? If you continue to do so, I will punish you." Seeing Yen Ruoxue like this, Minger didn't speak anymore. She turned around and picked up a feather duster to continue cleaning. "Sister! Sister!" Upon hearing this sound, Minger glared fiercely at the door and angrily threw the feather duster in her hand onto the ground. The person who can make Minger so angry is Yen Ruoxue, Yen Ruoxue's sister. A woman walked into the door, heavily dressed in brocade and silk, walking slowly. Yen Ruoxue stood up from her warm seat and said, "Sister Ruoxue is here. Please take a seat quickly." Yen Ruoxue glanced at Minger and the feather duster on the ground, walked up to Yen Ruoxue, and said, "Sister, this maid is really clumsy. She can't even hold the feather duster steady." Yen Ruoxue said, "Is there anything that my younger sister is here for today?" Yen Ruoxue took the opportunity to sit on the warm seat next to Yen Ruoxue and said, "Stupid girl, why don't you come over and show me some tea? I don't have any vision at all." Yen Ruoxue said, "Minger, go and brew a pot of hot tea for Miss Eyre." Minger just picked up the chicken feather duster on the ground and walked out. Seeing Minger go out, Yen Ruoxue turned her head to look at Yen Ruoxue and said, "Where did sister say? I heard that sister is not in good health, so come and see her." Yen Ruoxue said, "Thank you very much for your concern, sister. It's not a big deal." Yen Ruoxue said, "Sister, you've been sick for some time now. You've been so thin and out of shape, haven't you noticed?" Yen Ruoxue said, "Perhaps my appetite hasn't been good these days." Yen Ruoxue said, "Just now, my sister has some medicine to recuperate the spleen and stomach. I don't want someone to send it to my sister later. My father and mother are busy every day, so I can't take care of my sister. My sister should come to see her earlier." Yen Ruoxue was telling her how much her parents loved her, reminding her that she had no presence in this family, and even if she was so sick, no one would come to see her. Yen Ruoxue shouted loudly at the door again, "Where's my tea? It's so slow to brew tea, it's really stupid." Minger came in from outside the door and placed the tea in front of Yen Ruoxue. Yen Ruoxue picked up her tea and took a sip, then dropped the cup to the ground. She stood up and slapped Minger, saying, "Damn you, you want to scald me to death." Upon seeing this, Yen Ruoxue immediately stood in front of Minger and said, "Minger is still young, so she didn't want to make any mistakes. Sister, please calm down. Sister, I will go and get you some scalding medicine now." Yen Ruoxue knew she was deliberately causing trouble and dared not take action against her sister, so she could only take action against Minger. Ming'er was hurt by a slap and stood still with her face covered, afraid to speak. Yan Rushuang said, "Sister, are you defending this foolish girl? Do you want to protect this girl?" Yan Ruoxue was worried that her sister would hold on to this matter, so she had to push Ming'er away. Yan Ruoxue said to Ming'er behind her, "Ming'er, go get the burn medicine, go quickly." After Ming'er left, Yan Ruoxue looked at Yan Rushuang and said, "Sister, don't argue with a little girl. You need to quickly apply medicine to avoid leaving scars." Yan Rushuang sat back and said, "Sister, this little girl has impure thoughts. What she knows is that she is clumsy, and what she doesn't know is that she thought she was instigated by her sister. After everything has been done, sisters will show their deep feelings here." Yan Ruoxue said, "My younger sister naturally understands my sister's character. As long as she believes in her sister, let them talk about everything else." Chapter 3. Entering the Palace. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Yan Rushuang saw that she was determined to protect the girl Ming'er, so she couldn't say anything more. When Ming'er brought the ointment over, Yan Ruoxue immediately took it and said, Sister, can I apply medicine to you?" Yan Rushuang stood up and said, "Well, what good things can you have here? Sister, remember to train this clumsy girl well. Don't let her cause trouble for her. Sister needs to go back and apply medicine, so let's go first." When Yan Ruoxue walked out, she didn't forget to snort at Ming'er and bumped into her before leaving. After Yan Ruoxiang left, Ming'er looked at Yan Ruoxiang and said, "Miss, did Ming'er cause trouble for you?" Ming'er swore, "That cup of tea is really not hot." Yan Ruoxue touched the swollen face that had been beaten and said, "Does it still hurt?" Ming'er shook her head and said, "It doesn't hurt." Yan Ruoxue said, "Ming'er has been appointed." Ming'er immediately tearfully said, "Ming'er is not wronged, Miss is wronged." Yan Ruoxue hugged her in her arms. Her younger sister has been domineering and rude since childhood. On the day of entering the palace, Yan Ruoxue went to the hall to bid farewell to her father and mother. The two sitting tall, Yan Ruoxue bent her knees and bowed. "Greetings to father and mother." Yan Zhong waved his hand as a gesture of apology, and at that moment, a woman was holding 2 cups of tea in front of her. Yan Ruoxue stood in front of Yan Zhong holding tea and said, "Father, please have some tea." Yan Zhong took the tea from his hand and took a sip, saying, "Remember that day in the temple, in front of the Yan family's ancestors, you promised to be your father." Yan Ruoxue said, "Ruoxue must remember it in her heart." Then, Yan Ruoxue brought tea to her mother Yan Su and said, "Mother, my daughter will serve you tea." Yan Su took the tea and only took a sip, saying, "Sit down." "Thank you very much, mother." With Yan Su's words, Yan Ruoxue finally found a seat to sit down. Yan Rushuang, who had arrived late, ran over to her mother and coquettishly said, "Mother, my daughter is about to leave for the capital and will miss you very much." Yan Su smiled affectionately, as Yan Ruoxue had never smiled at her like this since she could remember. "Mother will also miss you." Yan Ruoxue looked at their happy family and realized that she was really the kind of extra person who wanted to find a way to crawl into the cracks. Yan Su said, "In the future, when you enter the palace, you can't do whatever you want like you do at home, you know. You should study like your sister and be more stable." Yan Rushuang said, "Are you being bullied like your sister?" Yan Zhong spoke up and said, "That's what your sister told you." Yan Ruoxue said, "This family is all mine. She's just a bystander, of course she allows me." Yan Ruoxue couldn't bear to listen anymore. She stood up and bowed again, saying, "Father, mother, Ruoxue seems to have left something behind and forgot to tidy it up. Let's say goodbye to her parents." Yan Zhong said, "Go. She actually doesn't have much to tidy up. Her clothes were prepared when the order was made, and the jewelry was also 2 sets made by her father a few days ago." After Yan Rushuang picked them out, she brought them to her. Yan Ruoxue walked out of the hall. She should have been used to it, but seeing such a scene still made her feel sad. Yen Ruoxue returned to the room, and Ming'er had already packed her things. Yen Ruoxue and Yen Rushwang rode their respective carriages and entered the capital city all the way. The city walls are tall and sturdy, with people and goods coming and going at the city gate. The carriage travels on the streets of the capital, and various sounds can be heard, including the cries of vendors, the sound of horse hooves, and the laughter and joy of people, creating a prosperous scene. Through the carriage window, one can see a plethora of shops, covering everything from food to clothing, jewelry to cosmetics, meeting people's various needs. Entering the palace city, the palace is magnificent, showcasing the majesty and glory of the empire. The carriage stopped at a palace, and the people on the carriage gradually got off. They all lined up together, using jade plates to distinguish official products and sorting them in order of rank. After arranging, an attendant led them into a place called Yonghua Palace. Ming'er and all the maidservants were stopped outside. They had to wait until they finished teaching and left the Yonghua Palace before they could follow their master into the palace. In the Yonghua Palace, a palace maid was standing there, and the eunuch walked straight to her side and said, "You are all noblewomen from official families. Today, when you enter the Yonghua Palace, you are all waiting for the selection of the crown princess. You should know that you are all here to wait for the selection of the crown princess. Put away your past family traditions and learn the etiquette of the palace here in order to better serve the crown prince." All the ladies bent their knees together and said, "Yes." The eunuch said again, "This is your teaching aunt by your side. You can call her Chui Gu." "Hello, Aunt Chui." The eunuch said, "Today, all the nobles will rest well and start learning the rules and etiquette of this palace tomorrow." Aunt Chui said, "Come with me." A room surrounded by 6 people was distributed to all the ladies, and Yen Ruoxue and Yen Rushwang were assigned a room. In the rooms of Yonghua Palace, each person made their own beds. Yen Rushwang suddenly stood up and said, "Sisters, my name is Yen Rushwang and I come from Chu County. I am the daughter of the county magistrate of Chu County. I have brought some things for you sisters." Yen Rushwang opened the package, which contained some jewelry and the like. A lady walked over and glanced at her, saying, "She's just a daughter of a 9th-grade county magistrate. It's interesting to bring it out and say, what good things can she bring to everyone?" Another young lady said, "I'm not the daughter of a 5th-grade or higher official here. It's not embarrassing to bring up a 9th-grade official, but I don't think I'm ashamed. Being a county magistrate is such a big official." Yen Rushwang's face immediately turned white, and she didn't know what to say for a moment. Yen Ruoxue only focused on her own business and didn't speak up. Chapter 4. Conflict. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Yen Ruoxue finally made the bed, tidied up her things, and went out to fetch water. When she came back, a young lady stopped her from entering and said, "Give me your water. I need to wash up and rest now." Yen Ruoxue looked at the person in front of her and remained silent. The young lady said, "You're still staring at me. The water you drew is something that miss I respect." Yen Ruoxue was about to enter when she bypassed her, and the young lady stubbornly blocked in front of her. Yen Ruoxue said, "Could you please step aside?" The eunuch said that when you enter the Yonghua Palace, there are only beautiful women, not noble women. The lady said, "How dare you even talk back?" With a fierce push from the young lady, Yen Ruoxue, who had already recovered from her serious illness, stumbled behind her and the basin of water in her hand spilled all over the ground. Yen Ruoxue fell to the ground, and at this moment, a lady stepped forward to help her up. Seeing a patch of blood on the floor tiles, upon closer inspection, she realized that the back of her head had been punctured. The lady supporting Yen Ruoxue said, "It's bleeding. Are you okay? Come on, I'll help you up." After helping Yen Ruoxue up, she touched the back of her head and found that the pain was still there, with blood stains on her hands. The Zaiyunu pushed her and said, who knew she was so weak that she collapsed with just one push. Yen Ruoxue said to the maid who helped her, "Thank you very much, sister. I have nothing to do." The maid supporting her said, "My name is Songyu, Sangyu is not the late you." Yen Ruoxue said, "Thank you very much, sister Songyu. My name is Yen Ruoxue." Upon hearing the commotion, Yen Ruoxuang leaned over to watch the commotion. Seeing the bloodstains on Yen Ruoxue's hands, she smiled and completely forgot about what had been mocked earlier. "Sister, it's not good for the wind cold yet." Songyu said, "Is she your sister?" Yen Ruoxuang said, "Isn't it my mother who doesn't know where to pick up the cheap sister?" Ha ha ha. The person who joined in the fun just smiled. Yen Ruoxue felt sour upon hearing this, but what Yen Ruoxuang said was also true. She did indeed pick it up. Yen Ruoxue walked forward and the maid who pushed her nervously said, "What are you doing?" "I am the daughter of the Minister of War." Everyone thought Yen Ruoxue was going to make a fuss, but he just bent down to pick up the basin. Songyu said, "Sister Ruoxue, you." Yen Ruoxuang said, "My older sister has always been submissive since she was young, and even after being wronged, she dare not breathe." Songyu said, "How could there be a younger sister like you in this world? If you don't help her own sister, you'll still be gloating there, full of strange emotions." Yen Ruo, the snowman, spoke softly and had no choice but to give up. He then turned around and went to the well to fetch water. Yen Ruoxuang said indifferently, "What's it to you? Don't worry about yourself here. My sister doesn't even accept your kindness." Songyu was speechless about Yen Ruoxuang, so he walked up to Yen Ruoxue and helped her fetch water. Seeing that there was no excitement to watch, I dispersed. Yen Ruoxue once again splashed water, so she decided not to take it back. "Just wipe your face and hands with a handkerchief in place, that's it." Songyu couldn't help but speak up and said, "Sister Ruoxue, you have a bad temper. If you just give in, you will only make everyone slap you in the face. You need to fight back." Yen Ruoxue said, "Sister Songyu, if the snowman speaks lightly, I don't want to confront them head-on. If you can avoid something, then avoid it." Songyu said, "My father is a general. He has always told me since he was young that if someone attacks, he must fight back twice and make others no longer dare to underestimate you." Yen Ruoxue said, "Sister Songyu is a kind-hearted person. Ruoxue admires her and it's getting late. Sister Songyu should rest earlier and learn palace rules and etiquette tomorrow." Yen Ruoxue returned to the room and lay in bed, falling asleep. On the second day, in the Yonghua Palace, my aunt taught me how to walk, salute, brew tea, mix incense, prepare dishes, and serve the crown prince's meals. After enduring those more than 10 days, they were all assigned to the Jinghui Palace where the ladies lived. Then there is the selection of qin, qi, calligraphy and painting, and finally the crown prince himself comes to choose. Ming'er was tidying up her things while cleaning up the dusty tables and chairs in the room. "Miss, Ming'er can be considered to be following you again." Listening to Ming'er's words, Yen Ruoxue stopped organizing the clothes in her hand and said, "You girl, what's the good of following me? You're being bullied." Ming'er said, "Miss is the best miss in the world. Ming'er shouldn't be separated from Mississippi." A woman stepped into the door, scrutinizing around while dusting her mouth and nose with her hands. Where did I say it came from? It turned out to be an unidentified poor woman picked up by the magistrate of Chu County. Upon hearing this, Ming'er suddenly became angry and crossed her hips, saying, "Who are you?" Yen Ruoxue called out, "Ming'er," and signaled that she didn't have to take it to heart. The visitor continued, "What comes from a small place is what comes from a small place, looking like you haven't seen the world before. Look at your shabby appearance." Yen Ruoxue walked over and stood in front of her, saying, "Sister, please accumulate some reputation. Our humiliation is our business, and it has nothing to do with sister. Your younger sister, too, takes things that are not on the table and treats them like treasures. Yen Ruoxue said, if you don't like me, you don't have to look at me. Ruoxue didn't invite my sister to come as a guest. Cut, when someone is rare. As Song Yu said, even if she doesn't cause trouble, people will still step on her. Chapter 5. Peering. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. After the woman at the door left, Ming'er spoke up and said, Miss, why don't you let Ming'er talk? She said that about you. Yen Ruoxue turned back and walked into the room. Yen Ruoxue said. She is also telling the truth. Besides, when we first arrived here, we didn't know each other well. More things are better than less. There is no mother's home behind me. Even if it is not far away, it will not support me. It is impossible to defeat them. We will be safe in this palace. After losing the election, we will wait to return to our hometown. Ming'er's eyes turned red as she listened to these words. Miss, it's really hard work. Yen Ruoxue said, silly girl, what's the point of saying whether it's hard or not? There are many people who suffer even more than you and me. At least we don't have to worry about not being able to eat. Walking to the bedside, he continued to tidy up his clothes. Ming'er said, if you want Ming'er to speak, it's still Miss who has a soft temper. Yen Ruoxue looked seriously at Ming'er beside her. Ming'er was a bit stunned and said, Miss, why are you looking at me like this? Yen Ruoxue said, Ming'er, this is the imperial palace, not like home. When speaking, you must not speak recklessly, otherwise it may be difficult to seek death or a whole body. Ming'er felt palpitations and her eyes froze, as if she had been frightened and hadn't regained consciousness for a long time. Yen Ruoxue said again, in this palace, be careful of the walls and ears at all times. The palace is a place that eats people and doesn't spit out bones. Your young lady only hopes that you are safe and sound, and if you can do less, you will do less. Ming'er nodded repeatedly without saying a word. Sister Ruoxue. Sister Ruoxue. Song Yu came in from outside the door. Yen Ruoxue welcomed her and said, Sister Song Yu, you're here. Please take a seat quickly. Song Yu said, Sister Ruoxue, don't be so polite. I just came to see if you need any help. Yen Ruoxue said, Ming'er, go and brew a pot of tea for Sister Song Yu. Ming'er said, okay, miss. Ming'er left, and Yen Ruoxue picked up Song Yu and stood beside the desk, saying, Sister Song Yu, Ruoxue has nothing to entertain you with. Just make do with it. Song Yu said, what's wrong with Sister Ruoxue? Isn't Song Yu the kind of person who worships high and tramples on low? Besides, it's not the first time I've met Sister Ruoxue. While chatting, Ming'er walked in with tea and placed it in front of Song Yu, saying, Miss Song, please have some tea. Thank you very much. Yen Ruoxue said, Miss Song Yu, please remember that everything is fine with Ruoxue. Seeing the two of them chatting, Ming'er left very consciously. Song Yu said, I originally thought my younger sister would be a close maid. I was afraid you wouldn't be able to handle it, so I came over to help. Yen Ruoxue smiled and said, having sister's heart is enough. She met Song Yuping by water, but Song Yuping was able to think of her in everything, and she was grateful from the bottom of her heart. Looking at my younger sister again, there is still the bond of growing up together, but every time she is always aggressive. Song Yu said, my sister and I get to know each other at first sight, and we always want to be able to help. It's always good. Yen Ruoxue said, Ruoxue has already felt her sister's desire to help her. Quick, fast, fast, the Crown Prince is here. Your Highness the Crown Prince. Your Highness the Crown Prince. There was a commotion outside the house. Yen Ruoxue called out, Ming'er, what happened outside? Ming'er came in from outside the door and replied, Miss, all the ladies outside are running crazy, saying that the Crown Prince is here. Song Yu said, I haven't passed the 4 exams of qin, chess, calligraphy, and painting yet. How could your highness the crown prince come to Jinghui Palace? Yan Ruoxue just drank tea calmly. Seeing Yan Ruoxue so calm, Song Yu asked again, Sister Ruoxue doesn't seem to be curious about this crown prince at all. Yan Ruoxue said, I'm not very curious. I had no intention of entering the palace, let alone hoping to receive the favor of the crown prince. Song Yu said, Sister Ruoxue, I have heard that the crown prince's son, Panan, has a beautiful appearance. Yan Ruoxue just smiled and said, my younger sister only wants to live a peaceful life in this palace until she leaves. She dare not covet the crown prince, nor does she expect to be selected. Song Yu said, my younger sister, don't hold too high hopes. The women who are waiting to be selected in the harem can be said to be the emperor's women. Even if they are not selected, they may be rewarded to meritorious officials in the future, and there will be no more opportunities for free marriage. Yan Ruoxue had never heard of this before. She even fantasized that she could stay until a certain age and be released from the palace if she couldn't become a crown prince. Song Yu said again, oh my dear sister, why don't you accompany her to take a look? Just take a glance. Speaking, Song Yu had already stood up and pulled Yan Ruoxue's arm towards the door. Everyone gathered around the crack in the entrance of Jinghui Palace and looked out from inside, squeezing and shoving each other. Yan Ruoxue looked at the group of people and felt how attractive the crown prince was. It's His Highness the Crown Prince. His Royal Highness, he has come over. I saw His Highness the Crown Prince's sedan chair driving away. Go over and let me see. Hey, don't push me. Song Yu looked at Yan Ruoxue and said, it seems we're late. Ming'er behind her said, Miss, let's go squeeze too. Ming'er also wants to see the heroic demeanor of the crown prince. Song Yu's maid, Chuxia, said, Miss, Chuxia will help you catch these people and throw them away. Song Yu said, in early summer, these are all delicate officials and noblewomen, unlike those servants in our family who cannot withstand falling. Do you want your young lady to be scolded to death? Chuxia said, but they're blocking your way to see His Highness the Crown Prince. Yan Ruoxue teased, in early summer, I reckon if you throw away these noble women, General Song will be able to run to this Jinghui Palace tomorrow and catch Sister Song Yu back. Chuxia said, that's just right. The young lady from the province has learned the rules in this palace. Chapter 6. The Man in Black. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Song Yu, who had not seen the crown prince, was not discouraged and pulled Yan Ruoxue back, talking and laughing. At night, Yan Ruoxue was extinguishing the candles and lying in bed sleeping. Under the moonlight outside, a figure was reflected on the window, moving. Ming'er. Is that you? Ming'er. No one answered her yet. She timidly got up from the bed, took off the candlestick cover, and held the candlestick on the table in her hand. Tiptoed to the door and gently opened a gap to look outside. I saw Ming'er wearing a cloak sitting on the doorstep on duty at night. Yan Ruoxue saw the figure on the window disappear, and she only thought her eyes were blurred. Yan Ruoxue took a deep breath, opened the door, and patted Ming'er's shoulder. Ming'er was surprised by the shoulder slap and turned around to see Yan Ruoxue holding a candlestick. She asked, Miss, what are you doing with the candlestick in your hand? Yan Ruoxue knew that Ming'er was timid and had no intention of telling her the truth. She only said, it's nothing, the wind just blew out the candle. Ming'er said, Miss, go to bed quickly. Ming'er is on duty here at night. Yan Ruoxue said, it's cool at night. You should go back and rest quickly. This is the Imperial Palace, and there are guards patrolling outside. You don't need to be on duty at night. Okay, miss, if you have anything to do, just call Ming'er. Ming'er went back to sleep, and Yan Ruoxue only returned to her room. As soon as she closed the door, someone suddenly covered her mouth, and the candlestick fell to the ground in fear. Make a piercing sound. Yan Ruoxue was about to call someone, but her mouth was covered and she couldn't make any sound. "Don't shout, I'll let go." The person behind me was accompanied by rapid breathing. Yen Ruoxue calmed down for a moment and nodded to indicate that she could do it. The person behind her released her hand, and Yen Ruoxue instinctively stepped back a step away. Her legs softened and she sat on the ground, her heart seeming to stop beating in fear. She was still in a state of shock and didn't come to her senses. She gasped for breath and groped her hand blindly, touching the candlestick that had fallen to the ground. After grabbing something in his hand, he finally regained his senses and looked over, only to see that it was an 8-foot man. The man was dressed in black and couldn't see his face clearly. Yen Ruoxue was holding a candlestick in both hands and smashing it at him when the man grabbed both hands with one hand. "You!" The man's voice was hoarse. Yen Ruoxue couldn't break free and struggled in front of the man. After a blink of an eye, Yen Ruoxue felt her grip on both of her wrists loosen. She smashed a candlestick onto the man's head, and he fell to the ground. Yen Ruoxue was frightened when she saw the man fall to the ground and couldn't get up, causing her to throw the candlestick on her hand a long way away. Killed someone, she killed someone, feeling a wave of fear in her heart. She groped on the man's face, felt his breathing still, and settled down before swallowing a mouthful of saliva. After a series of scares, she was so weak that she couldn't stand on her feet anymore. Yen Ruoxue crawled towards the spot where she had just thrown the candlestick and touched it. After finally putting the candlestick on the table and lighting the candle, she was exhausted. When she regained her senses, she used the candlelight to see the people on the ground clearly. That person has a tall figure, beautiful eyebrows and eyes, a handsome face, and fair skin color. She walked over cautiously and only then did she realize that the man had a chest injury and blood was still flowing out. Yen Ruoxue touched the man's arm with her foot, confirming that he had indeed fainted, and then squatted down to drag the man up and lean against the door. After a lot of effort, she reluctantly lifted the man up and leaned his back against the door. Seeing that the man was injured too badly and still bleeding, she knocked on his candlestick again. Out of guilt, she picked up her handkerchief and pressed it onto the wound. I don't know how deep the wound was, and blood kept oozing out. She took out the trauma medicine she usually used at the bottom of the dowry as a precaution. Pour the entire bottle onto a handkerchief and cover the wound. She had intended to wait for the bleeding to stop, but ended up sleeping while waiting. The sound of slapping on the door was accompanied by Minger's shout of "Miss, Miss." Yen Ruoxue woke up and opened her eyes to find that the man in black was no longer on the ground, and the handkerchief in her hand was also gone. She was busy groping and scrutinizing around her body, only to find that she was disheveled and relieved. She stood up and opened the door. Minger saw blood on her hand and quickly threw away the basin in her hand. She pulled Yen Ruoxue around and said, "Miss, how did you get hurt? Where did you get hurt?" Yen Ruoxue then grabbed Minger's hand and said, "Minger, I'm fine. I helped an injured person get a bone grafting in my dream last night. This is that person's." Minger looked incredulous and said, "In my dream? When did Miss get back to bone grafting?" Yen Ruoxue said, "Hurry up and fetch water. You've knocked over the water." Minger said, "Miss, I have to go to assess the piano, chess, calligraphy, and painting today. I almost forgot about it." Minger suddenly remembered that the water had spilled over, and then turned around to pick up the basin and fetch water. "Minger, this little girl has a good temper. She's really easy to deceive. Just saying this makes her believe it." By the time Minger finished pouring water, Yen Ruoxue had already changed into her outerwear. After wiping her face and washing her hands, Minger applied makeup to her and headed towards the Elan Hall. Chapter 7. Polo Tournament. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Those who go to assess qi, calligraphy and painting will be sent to the Crown Prince's East Palace after passing the assessment. Those who fail the assessment will continue to stay in the Jinghui Palace or serve as female officials in the palace. Yan Ruoxue has passed every item in Class B. After passing the assessment, Yan Ruoxue moved into the west side hall of the Yihua Hall in the East Palace of the Crown Prince as a ceremonial figure, along with a Crown Prince Liangdi who lived in the East Side Hall. Fengyi is the lowest rank, with higher ranks including Zhaoxuan, Chengwei, Liang Yuan, Liangdi, Crown Princess, Side Consort, and Crown Princess. Ming'er tidied up the room of the Yihua Palace and said, "Miss, we can also be considered members of the Eastern Palace now." Yan Ruoxue nodded and continued to sit on the warm seat, staring blankly. "Miss, once you take on the favor, you can shine on the door lintel." Yan Ruoxue said, "Ming'er, don't say this anymore. If you say it, it will make people laugh." Ming'er said, "Ming'er believes that with the outstanding beauty of the young lady, it is inevitable to be favored." Yan Ruoxue said, "There are many beautiful women in this harem. How could it be your turn, Mississippi? There are many people in this palace who have not even seen the Crown Prince's face. You are not allowed to say this in the future." Ming'er pouted and said, yes, Ming'er won't say anything." Yan Ruoxue said, "There is also a Crown Prince Liangdi in this Yihua Palace. According to the rules, I should go and visit Crown Prince Liangdi." Ming'er said, "Miss, are you going now? After you finish packing up, go ahead." Leaving this sentence behind, she had no intention of listening to what Ming'er was saying. In this current situation, neither advancing nor retreating. She herself had no intention of becoming the Crown Prince's wife or concubine, and coming to this palace was also a helpless move. No matter where she is, her situation is similar. Although I was in the county magistrate's office before, I still couldn't feel the warmth of home. Mississippi. A young lady called back the thoughtful Yan Ruoxue. "Miss, didn't you say you were going to visit Prince Liangdi?" Yan Ruoxue stood up and said, "Let's go." Yan Ruoxue walked out of the room to the entrance of the side hall at the other end, where a palace maid was splashing water outside. Fengyi is not equipped with palace maids, only concubines above Liangdi can have palace maids. "Sister, our young lady has come to pay her respects to Liangdi." Upon hearing Ming'er's words, the palace maid said, "Let me go and report." Ming'er said, "Thank you, sister." After a moment of entering, the palace maid came out and said, "Please be honored." Yan Ruoxue then walked in and saw the woman leaning on the warm seat. She nodded slightly and leaned down, saying, "I am honored that Yan Ruoxue has come to pay respects to Sister Liangdi. Free gift, give me a seat." A little palace maid just brought in a small stool. Yan Ruoxue said, "Thank you very much, Sister Liangdi." After thanking her, she sat down. "You are the newly selected Fengyi among these beautiful women, and you have given birth quite well." Upon hearing Liangdi's question, Yan Ruoxue smiled faintly and said, "Thank you very much for your praise, Sister Liangdi. Since it's a ceremony, everyone is a woman of His Royal Highness the Crown Prince. You don't have to come to visit me every day in the future. Wait until the main hall of the Yihua Palace is in charge, then pay your respects." Yan Ruoxue said, "Liangdi is my sister, and Ruoxue is my sister. I should pay my respects. His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince, never sets foot here in this palace. It's useless for you to come. Whether you really want to come and visit or have any other thoughts, you've made the wrong decision. This Liangdi is also a straightforward person." Listening to this, it seems that this Liangdi thought she came from a bad person. The person in the warm seat lazily yawned. Yan Ruoxue stood up and said, "Let's not bother Sister Liangdi. As a newcomer, Ruoxue still has many items in the house that have not been properly decorated. Go ahead." Yan Ruoxue walked out of the room and heard a sentence at the door. "I see new people laughing, but not old people crying." As soon as Yan Ruoxue returned to the room, Ming'er complained, "Why is Prince Liangdi like this? Miss intended to go and pay her respects, but she was mistaken for someone with ulterior motives. Yen Ruoxue glanced at Ming'er and said, "Speak up, in this palace, you can't speak recklessly. Be careful not to let misfortune come out of your mouth." Upon hearing this, Ming'er should keep her mouth shut. Yen Ruoxue only sighed at the age of Liang Dihua, being trapped in the deep palace and unable to leave again. What about one's own destiny? What does it look like again? Should I be trapped in the deep palace or should I be rewarded as a concubine when I get old? After calming down for a few days, Song Yu happily entered from the outside of the Yihua palace. "Sister Ruoxue, Sister Ruoxue." Upon hearing Song Yu's voice, Yen Ruoxue met her at the door. As soon as he saw Yen Ruoxue, Song Yu took her hand and said, "Let's go, follow me." Before Yen Ruoxue could ask where to go, Song Yu had already taken several steps. Early summer and Ming'er followed behind. Song Yu no longer had the delicate posture and gait she used to have. "Sister Song Yu, this is the Eastern Palace. Pay attention to your appearance." Song Yu finally stopped and said, "Look, I'm so happy that I forgot." Yen Ruoxue then asked, "Sister, why are you so happy?" The smile that Song Yu couldn't conceal told Yen Ruoxue that something good must have happened, causing Song Yu to completely forget the palace rules and etiquette he had learned in the palace. Song Yu said, "My brother is here." Yen Ruoxue could understand why Song Yu was so happy. It turned out that someone at home had come to see her. But when Song Yu's brother comes, what's the matter with him? What's the point of pulling her so fast? Song Yu said again, "Today there is a polo match held in the palace, which is very lively. His Highness the Crown Prince must be present, and even the princes outside the palace have entered the palace. My brother has also come, which can be said to be a grand event." Yen Ruoxue said, "Those are all external men. We are the Crown Prince's concubines, isn't that good? In this palace, all men except for the Crown Prince are foreign men, and having private meetings with foreign men is a capital offense." Song Yu said, "Let's just watch quietly. Many palace maids are here, and we're not conspicuous inside either." Chapter 8. Falling from a Building. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Yen Ruoxue was pulled to the polo field by Song Yu, which was a wide field surrounded by the city wall on all sides. The surrounding city walls were surrounded by palace maids and attendants. The people on the field were dressed in fresh clothes and riding horses with great elegance, hitting polo. Song Yu was holding Yen Ruoxue in the crowd when suddenly Song Yu danced and pointed to a man riding a horse, saying, "That's my brother." Afraid that she might not hear, he patted Yen Ruoxue's shoulder and said, "Sister Ruoxue, have you seen it?" Yen Ruoxue looked in the direction and saw the person on horseback. "Isn't it sister who doesn't like to join in this kind of fun?" Yen Ruoxue turned around and saw Yen Ruoxuang coming with the two of them. One of them is the person who pushed her at Jinghui Palace. Song Yu didn't get angry when he saw a few people. Dao said, "Your legs are on Sister Ruoxue. It doesn't matter where you're going, right?" Yen Ruoxuang and Yen Ruoxue passed by. The person on the field scored a goal and there was a burst of cheers. A group of palace maids and attendants came over and dispersed Yen Ruoxue and Song Yu. Ming'er called out to Yen Ruoxue in the crowd, but the voices were so loud that no response could be heard. Yen Ruoxue suddenly saw the young man riding a horse under the city with a familiar face. That's not the man she knocked on the candlestick that night. The candlelight was too dim that night, and Yen Ruoxue couldn't see it clearly. It looked even better on this day. I was fascinated by it for a moment, and someone behind me pushed her to the edge of the city wall. Before she could stand firm, one hand grabbed her leg and lifted it up. With a sound of "ah," Yen Ruoxue fell off the city wall. Upon hearing the sound, the people under the city wall rode back and steadily caught her. She thought she had fallen so hard, but little did she know that a pair of sturdy arms caught her. Mississippi. Ming'er on the city wall shouted loudly. Sister Ruoxue. Song Yu also saw Yan Ruoxue falling from the building. Yan Ruoxue opened her eyes and saw a stunning face, the person she had knocked on the candlestick. I was mesmerized by the sight and forgot that I had just stepped on the door of hell. The man said coldly, "Have you seen enough?" Yan Ruoxue suddenly realized that she was still in the man's arms. She was about to shift her gaze when she saw that the man's chest had already begun to bleed. He was dressed in black clothes, but because he was close, she still saw him. I think it was because I caught her, exerted too much force, and the wound burst open. The man coldly threw Yan Ruoxue off the horse, and Yan Ruoxue stumbled twice, finally standing firm. Other horsemen also came over and saw Yan Ruoxue, saying, "What's going on?" "Your Highness the Crown Prince." Upon hearing from His Highness the Crown Prince, Yan Ruoxue was so frightened that she quickly knelt on the ground and said, "My concubine, please pay respects to Your Highness the Crown Prince." Although Yan Ruoxue knelt on the ground and kowtowed her head, she felt like she was being seen through by the person in front of her. It turns out to be a person of His Royal Highness the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince said, "I have never seen her before in this palace. I believe she is one of these newly entered ladies. I think I came here to see His Highness the Crown Prince's heroic appearance." The hurried attendant pointed at Yan Ruoxue and cursed, How dare you stir up the polo match prepared by His Highness the Crown Prince, disturbing the interest of all the nobles. Are you living impatiently?" Yan Ruoxue was so frightened that her whole body trembled with fear. She knelt down with her 3 souls gone and said, "My concubine is guilty. Please punish me, Your Highness." Song Yu and Ming'er also came down from the city wall in early summer and knelt down beside Yan Ruoxue, saying, "My concubine, I pay my respects to Your Highness the Crown Prince." "Ayu. Why are you here?" The Crown Prince asked, "Do you know General Song?" The person immediately got off the horse and knelt on the ground, saying, "This is the maid who collided with His Highness the Crown Prince. Please forgive me, Your Highness." The Crown Prince said, "Surprisingly, it's General Song's sister." Song Xiaojun said, "It's all because Wei Chen's parents are too spoiled by her on weekdays, that's why they do what they want." The Crown Prince said, "All right, let's all get up." "Your Highness, Prince Xie." Ming'er stood up and then helped up Yan Ruoxue, who was trembling all over. Yan Ruoxue stood up but dared not look up. The Crown Prince said, "Well, today our palace will not punish Song Fengyi just for the sake of General Song's face." "Ayu, thank you to Your Highness the Crown Prince." Song Yu said, "My concubine, thank you very much, Your Highness the Crown Prince." The Crown Prince said, "Duke Gao, you know what to do." Everyone rode away on horseback, leaving behind Yan Ruoxue and Song Yu, with the attendant in place. Gao Gonggang said, "Song Fengyi, let's go back first. This is the school venue, and you are the Crown Prince's wife. It's not appropriate to be here." Song Yu said, "Duke Gao, that Yan Fengyi admires her." Before Song Yu could finish speaking, Gao Gongdang's face was clearly displeased and he said, "Song Fengyi, you have stirred up this polo match. Your Highness, the Crown Prince, has shown kindness to you in front of General Song. Don't make mistakes again and again." Yan Ruoxue said, "Sister Song Yu, hurry up and go back. Ruoxue is fine, early summer, send Sister Song Yu back." Song Yu said, "Sister Ruoxue, it's all my fault. I shouldn't have brought you here. Early summer helped Song Yu away." Gao Gonggang said, "You have disturbed the Crown Prince's interest. Do you know that even taking off your head is not enough?" Yan Ruoxue said, "Ruoxue's unintentional loss, I hope my father.in.law can learn from it." Gao Gonggang said, "Our family doesn't care if you intentionally caught the attention of the Crown Prince or if you unintentionally stumbled. Let's punish you as a maid at the clothes washing bureau to make amends for your wrongdoing." Chapter 9. Cloth Washing Bureau. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Yen Ruoxue was convicted of going to the laundry bureau to do laundry, along with Ming'er. The clothes washing bureau are all slaves who have committed major mistakes, and if they don't commit crimes until death, they will be punished with hard labor. Yen Ruoxue only treats people in this palace as if they don't vomit their bones, and if they make mistakes, they will be punished and their heads will fall off. I never thought this palace would be in crisis step by step, with people with ulterior motives everywhere, making it difficult to prevent. Song Yu is right. Her non-competitive and non-competitive personality makes it really difficult for her to survive in this palace. Now falling into such a situation is also a disaster destined for oneself. Fortunately, Xiaoming is still alive, and being punished here is not unacceptable. At least when the world pardons her, she can go home. Every time I think of this place, I feel like it's not as good as here. That home seems to have never been her home. There is no family, no warmth, only watching their happy and harmonious appearance. From childhood to adulthood, only Ming'er cared about her and only met Song Yu in this palace. Yen Ruoxue and Ming'er packed their things and were taken by the eunuch to the clothes washing bureau. When the steward's aunt saw someone coming, she respectfully stood there and said, "Shui Gonggang, I wonder what happened to these two people before they were punished." The steward aunt only wanted to ask what had happened to these two people. If it was a small matter, she naturally wouldn't dare to neglect the people who could still leave this laundry room. Or for those who have connections outside and can earn money, she naturally offered her up. Shui Gonggang said, "Aunt Wang, these two people collided with His Highness the Crown Prince and were punished." Got it. They are being well received. Upon hearing Shui Gonggang's words, she knew that these two people were destined not to leave this clothes washing bureau. She treated them well. Aunt Wang said, "I will naturally treat them well." Shui Gonggang turned around and left, while Wang Auntie glared fiercely at Yen Ruoxue and said, "Come with me. This place is not like where you used to be. If you can't finish your work here, you won't have any food to eat." Yen Ruoxue followed Aunt Wang to a courtyard where she could smell a foul odor before even stepping inside. Walking in, there were small hills of night pots and buckets piled inside. Ming'er took Aunt Wang's hand and said, "Grandpa Gao only said he would punish my young lady to come to the clothes washing bureau, but he didn't say he would let her come to brush the toilet." Aunt Wang slapped Ming'er in the face, and Yen Ruoxue immediately pulled Ming'er behind her. Aunt Wang said, "You still consider yourself a noble lady. You have collided with His Highness the Crown Prince. I'm afraid if you don't encounter amnesty in your lifetime, you won't be able to leave this clothes washing bureau for the rest of your life." Ming'er said, "My young lady is a courtesan. That's the woman of His Highness the Crown Prince. You actually asked her to brush the toilet." Wang Auntie laughed heartily and said, "It's really easy for you to be the woman of the Crown Prince. There are not only 1,000 but also hundreds of offerings in this palace, some of whom have never seen the Crown Prince in their lifetime. Now that you have collided with the Crown Prince and caused his displeasure, there will be no chance." Aunt Wang pushed Yen Ruoxue hard, causing her to stumble. "Hurry up and brush it. If you can't finish it, don't eat." After finishing speaking, Aunt Wang walked out of the courtyard disdainfully. Ming'er Wei looked at Yen Ruoxue with Chu Baba and said, "Miss, go rest. Ming'er, come and brush." Yen Ruoxue said, "It's okay, it's Ming'er. It's me who caused you trouble." Ming'er said, "Miss, don't say that. Why did you just fall off the city wall?" "Someone pushed me down." Ming'er said, "Who is so malicious that he should take your life?" She was just too scared just now, she didn't even think about it. When Ming'er said this, she remembered that it was such a deep calculation. If no one catches her, she will fall so high that she will not die or be disabled. If someone catches her, they will collide with the Crown Prince, and the outcome will be the same. In short, they can no longer be the Crown Prince's concubine. Who had such ulterior motives, but when he fell just now, he was so scared that he couldn't even open his eyes and didn't even see who it was. But without thinking, one can guess that the person who killed her must be the person from the Crown Prince's East Palace. But on the city wall, she only saw Yen Ruoxuang and the other two people, and with just a blink of an eye. "Miss, do you remember who it was?" Yen Ruoxue said, "No, let's work, otherwise we'll go hungry later." The two of them began to brush the bucket. At the dinner, Ming'er came to Yen Ruoxue with a bowl of congee and 2 mantou. "Miss, have some congee." Just as Yen Ruoxue takes the congee from Ming'er, Aunt Wang snatches it from her, and she spits in the bowl. Aunt Wang said, "Take it. Eat it." Ming'er saw the situation and said, "I said, why are you like this?" Aunt Wang clapped the mantou out of Ming'er's hand with her other hand and crushed the mantou with her foot. Then he poured the bowl of congee on the ground in front of Ming'er and said, "Do you still want to eat before the toilet is finished?" Ming'er stood up for her like this. She was afraid that Ming'er would be slapped again later. Yen Ruoxue said, "Let's go." Ming'er said, "They have people working again, and they don't even give food." Surrounded by a group of maids, they looked as if they were about to punch and kick them immediately. Yen Ruoxue picked up Ming'er and returned to the small courtyard filled with buckets. Brushing until midnight, the two of them didn't finish either. It was already a late autumn night, and the cold well water was piercing cold. Yen Ruoxue looked at the blisters on her hand caused by washing the toilet, and on the first day, she was already humble to the dust. "I don't know how long I will stay here and when it will end. Although I used to be unpopular, I had never done such rough work before." Ming'er saw Yen Ruoxue like this and put down the things in her hand to take her hand. She felt sorry and said, "Miss, your hand is broken. Miss has also suffered like this before." Yen Ruoxue only sighed and said, "Ming'er, we can't continue like this. If no one helps us, we can help ourselves." Chapter 10. Opportunities. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Yen Ruoxue was here brushing the bucket while waiting for the opportunity. On this day, Aunt Wang came here with a few people and saw 2 people seriously brushing the toilet. Can't you all see it? With so many buckets, the nobles in each palace are waiting to use them. Why don't you go help? Are the 2 eyeballs used as decorations? Upon hearing Aunt Wang's words, several people behind her came to help. Yen Ruoxue knew very well that Aunt Wang would visit the 3 treasures hall for everything. She has been here for so long, and she hasn't come to take a look. Like this kind of person who is not profitable and does not rise early, it is necessary to use the place to obtain oneself. Isn't this the opportunity that one wants? When you doze off, someone will give you a pillow. Yen Ruoxue pretended to turn a blind eye and continued to do her own work. Yen Ruoxue saw that she was hesitating to speak, so she must have thought about how she had been treating her these days and how difficult it was to speak. Yen Ruoxue cannot miss this opportunity for nothing. She will take a gamble. Since she cannot speak up, I will give her a chance. She deliberately made a cut on the edge of the bucket with her hand. Oh! Yen Ruoxue threw down the thing in her hand and held the injured hand. "What's wrong, miss?" Ming'er hurriedly ran over upon hearing this. Aunt Wang also followed over and said, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" Looking at the figure of Aunt Wang approaching, Yen Ruoxue knew she had made the right bet. Yen Ruoxue said, "I'm fine." Ming'er said, "Miss, it's all bleeding." "You said it's okay." Aunt Wang said, "You're clumsy. Since you're injured, let's take a break." Yen Ruoxue said, "But Aunt Wang, Ruoxue's bucket has not been finished yet. Didn't you say that the nobles in each palace are still waiting to use it? If they don't finish it later, they might have no food to eat again." Ming'er said, "Miss, just listen to Aunt Wang." Aunt Wang said, "All right, if you want to take a break, then take a break. Isn't there someone brushing over there?" I think the injury is quite serious. I don't have any trauma medicine, come with me. Yen Ruoxue said, thank you very much, Aunt Wang. Yen Ruoxue followed Aunt Wang to her room. I saw Aunt Wang take out a small bottle from the cabinet and put it in Yen Ruoxue's hand. Thank you very much, Aunt Wang. Aunt Wang said, I won't help you in vain. I knew she wouldn't be so kind, she must take this opportunity to get rid of the fate of brushing the bucket. Yen Ruoxue said, I don't know what Ruoxue can do for you. Ruoxue will definitely spare no effort to do it. Aunt Wang said, do you know Su embroidery? Yen Ruoxue recognized the meaning behind it and thought that she could achieve the position of Fengyi. She thought that female workers could also get by. Just as she wanted, she took the opportunity to scoop out Ming'er as well. Slightly dabbling in it, I don't know why Aunt Wang asked so. Wang's Aunt Su said, then I'll get straight to the point. A few days ago, Qi Guifei's embroidered silk cloak was sent to the clothes washing bureau, and a palace maid washed a damaged area. Now we urgently need someone who knows Su embroidery to repair it, and we can't spread it. If Qi Guifei blames us, the entire clothes washing bureau will be put to death. She really has a good calculation, and the credit for the repair lies with her. If the repair is not good, she will become the culprit. When the time comes, the blame will lie entirely on her. Yen Ruoxue smiled and said, I wonder if Ruoxue can take a look at that cloak. Aunt Wang took out a folded pink satin cloak embroidered with lifelike lotus flowers. Yen Ruoxue looked at it and said, Ruoxue is willing to give it a try. It combines flat needle embroidery and random needle embroidery, but Ruoxue needs Ming'er's help. Aunt Wang said, are you confident? Yen Ruoxue said, 9 out of 10 are sure. Aunt Wang said, okay, I'll give you the person. If you can't do it then, just wait for Consort Qi to surrender. What a combination of kindness and authority. However, Su embroidery was something she could embroider very well in earlier years. In order to please her foster mother, she stayed up for several days and nights to embroider a piece of clothing for her on her foster mother's birthday. As a result, the foster mother looked down upon her and turned around to reward her dowry maid. Now it comes in handy. Yen Ruoxue now has a separate room and doesn't need to brush the toilet anymore. The cloak on the embroidery frame is being repaired by Yen Ruoxue. Ming'er, who was sitting beside her, said, Miss, you did it. We really don't need to brush the toilet anymore. We also have our own room. Yen Ruoxue said, how can I say you're good? Miss, is this cloak so beautiful? Do all the ladies in the palace wear it? Ming'er chattered incessantly, and she was also used to it. Over the years, it was all thanks to Ming'er's coaxing. After finally repairing the cloak, she handed it over to Aunt Wang. After reading it, Aunt Wang immediately said with a friendly expression, I owe you a favor. You don't need to brush the toilet anymore. Just stay here and send clothes to the nobles in each palace. Thank you very much, Aunt Wang. Afterwards, with the approval of Aunt Wang, everyone showed great respect to Yen Ruoxue.